We are coming up on the entrance of Fort Boonesborough. As you can see, it is a 20-30 foot high wall built of logs. This is the entrance gate.
Welcome to Fort Boonesborough in Kentucky. We are sending you a map that shows how the fort is built in a rectangle and how the cabins were all connected for safety. You'll also get a package of seeds that you can plant, and we'll show you where the garden is that might be where you would see them plant these sort of seeds.
In your box you will find a large print map and a braille map. So the cabin goes, like Gina said, it goes in a large rectangle with all of the cabins connected and a wall built behind those, and that is to guard from intruders and for the people to stay safe within these walls. So in the middle of the cabin you can see that there is the blacksmith, the oven, the weaving cabins, and then you have the garden. In the garden you might find plants of beans, carrots, potatoes, things to feed their people. You might also find plants of lavender or herbs used as medicine.
Hi, please take out bag number 1 for the family cabin at Boonesborough Park.
Colonial families were made up of a large family unit. They usually had lots of children, aunts and uncles and grandparents all living in the same cabin. Everybody was responsible for helping. They would help with the chores, with cooking, with mending clothing, and even if Grandma wasn't physically able to do anything else, she could sit and do some work helping out the family unit.
We're at cabin number 2 at Boonesborough, and we have some wefts in bag number 2 that you can take out and watch as she weaves a blanket.
The whirl of the spinning wheel and the crack thump of the loom were familiar sounds in colonial homes during this time period. Our primary fibers were wool and linen. I'm spinning wool today on my great wheel. Spinning just simply means twisting, and most girls would learn how to spin at a very young age. By the age of 7, you probably were a skilled spinner. Spinning just simply means twisting the fibers together to make yarn and thread of different fibers. It was important because on the frontier we were far away from trade routes, and so if you had a spinning wheel and the skill to spin, and you could make your own thread or your yarn so that you have much needed fabric, it was a good skill to have. The first spinning wheel, according to folklore, came to Kentucky tied to a pack horse. Anne Pope McGinney refused to come to Kentucky without her spinning wheel. She spun buffalo wool and fibers from a plant called stinging wool and made some much needed fabric, especially for the men's day. After you get your spinning done, and it does take lots of long threads to supply a weaver. The weaver threads some of the threads onto the loom. Those are the lengthwise threads called warp. The shuttle carries your filling thread, the weft. This loom is over 200 years old, so it's typical of a handmade loom during this time period. And that brought the first spinning wheel to Kentucky. Her husband, William, built the first loom in Kentucky. He was a very skilled woodworker. The shuttle is passed back and forth over and under the warp threads. Threads have to be switched by pushing down the next foot straddle. That locks the threads into place. If your mom gave you this job to do and she didn't hear that clack thump, she would know that you had left the loom and probably had gone outside to play and was not doing your job for the day.
A table with a basket of wool and thread to weave. On the back table are baskets with more weaving material. And here is an example of a finished weaved product. A rug, a placemat, a blanket,
So now we're going to cabin number 3, and this is the Tavern. So at the Tavern, you will take out your number 3 bag, and there's some beef and cheese in there. This may have been a sample of something they may have had to eat during that period.
the blockhouse as tavern, meeting house, warehouse. On the wall as you walk in, there are examples of old documents that you might have seen. Plat maps, and this one just happens to be of Fort Boonesborough. A letter signed about the Louisiana Purchase. Just a small example of the writings or documents that you might have seen during this time period.
Welcome to Fort Boonesborough Tavern. This would have been the center of life at the fort. The meetings, court would have been held at the tavern here. They could have come for food and drink. Your court would have been held here. Your first legislation session of Henderson's company, Transylvania Company, would have been held here, and they passed some of the first laws for the frontier.
They have wooden slats for benches for seating, rocking chairs, wooden benches against the wall for seating, various plaques and documents on the wall, furs for decoration, this one happens to be a buffalo. It's very large. Barrels to hold beverages that they might have had in the tavern. On this post you'll see a listing of what it would have cost for each meal. Breakfast, 6 pence. Dinner, 1 shilling. Supper, 7 pence. Lodging, or a room for the night, was 8 pence per night. A stuffed squirrel. Sacks of flour for baking. A wooden bar or serving table where they might have served the food for the day. You'll see another large fur on the wall, and this is the fur of an elk.
Now we're at number 4, the spinning cabin. In this cabin, they would have dyed their wool different colors. And tie-dye is the modern way that we do dyeing now, but they would have dyed it with berries and different kinds of leaves and natural things.
And this is the spinning cabin, where wool is the most common type of fiber used.
Welcome to the spinning cabin. The small wheel was used during this time period. I demonstrated the walking wheel earlier. The little wheel, as it was called, is operated with a foot treadle and allows the spinner to sit and spin. It's much faster than the walking wheel. Here's an example of treadling a spinning wheel.
Notice how she's moving her foot up and down to make the wheel spin.
After the wool is spun and made into yarn, many times they wanted different colors for their knitting and for their weaving, and so natural dyes were used. There's many things in nature that will provide a natural dye for yarns. Over here are some examples. The Kentucky State Flower goldenrod makes a really pretty yellow. Queen Anne's lace grows abundantly in Kentucky and also makes a pretty yellow. Ironweed is a weed that also grows abundantly in Kentucky and can be used as a dye for greens. This has been dyed with sumac berries. Lots of berries can be used as a dye. One of the most popular dye colors was the dark brown achieved from black walnuts. When you want to dye your yarn different colors, you take your dye material, put it in a big pot, open an open fire outside, and you cook the plants or the nuts or the berries to get the dye colors out of the material, and then you put your yarn in it and let it cook for about 30 minutes to an hour, and then you have some pretty yarns. The yarns were not only used for weaving, like the loom demonstration I did earlier, but also for knitting. This little cap was knitted with some sheep wool. Over here's some fleece from a sheep. Sheep are sheared in the spring. The fleece is the sheep's winter coat. So after the wool is sheared from the sheep, it has to be washed and cleaned.
all the little sticks and burrs that the sheep may pick up, and its fleece has to be picked out. Then the wool is carded using cards to get all the fibers running parallel for spinning. Earlier I mentioned the family unit and how that grandma may not be physically able to do anything, but she could do some jobs sitting down. Combing the wool or carding the wool was one of the jobs usually given to grandma. Everybody helped out. It was a skill that was taught at young ages. It wasn't all women's work. A lot of boys were taught how to weave on the loom. It is exciting to see what colors we can achieve in nature. Most of the time you might want to wear colors that blended well in the woods.
So on one wall we have a fireplace used for heat. The table with the various tools used to weave. And in the loft, or the upper section of the cabin, we have various spinning weaving wheels.
Hi, we're at the 5th cabin, so get out bag number 5 and you'll find some wood shavings because we're going into the Woodworkers Cabin.
A sign above the door, woodworking.
Welcome to the Woodworking Cabin. Before you, there's lots of tools that have been used in the woodworking shop. Before you is a treadle lathe, foot power to turn the instrument.
He's moving his foot up and down on the bar, and in turn,
also before you are on the table over there are some of the items that we have made, wooden bowls, spoons, items that have been needed on the frontier.
on one wall of the cabin we have another fireplace for heat, various saws and tools on the walls of the cabin. Here again is a display of various hammers that would have been used in that time period. And other tools that might have been used. This is called the iron collection.
Hi, we are at the Surveyors Cabin, so get out your number 6 envelope, baggie, and you will find some Native American tattoos in there. And we have someone here that's going to talk to you about the Surveyors Cabin and Native Americans.
So the land that is Kentucky was originally thought of as Virginia. It was considered Virginia before it became Kentucky. And the Cumberland Gap, which is the area that the settlers used to come into Kentucky, was not a secret to a lot of people. A lot of people knew what it was and where it was, but when Daniel Boone first came through the Gap the very first time on one of his long hunts and spent an extended amount of time here, on his way back he was captured by the Shawnee. The Shawnee took everything he had and told him that they were basically going to let him live as long as he promised to never ever come back to Kentucky, and if he did, he would be stung by the wasps and poked by all the thorns of the forest. He in fact did come back, much to the dissatisfaction of the Shawnee. Now, Ohio, which is north of Kentucky, was the primary homelands of the Shawnee. To the south of Kentucky, you had people like the Cherokee. But when natives came down from the Ohio River Valley to raid the forts here of the people that they told not to be here, it wasn't just the Shawnee that were here. It was the Shawnee, it was the Mingo, it was the Wyandot, there was what was left of the Miami at the time. So it wasn't necessarily one tribe, it was a handful of tribes that had gotten together to basically strengthen their forces and try to live as best as they could together. To the south, you had the Cherokee, but you also had people like the Seminole that were not far from the Cherokee. Kentucky itself was considered the land of the Shawnee, but there were parts of Kentucky that were also considered parts of Cherokee land as well. And to this day, if you ask the tribes who Kentucky belonged to, the Shawnee will say it was ours, but the Cherokee will also say it was ours. They both were here, they both had villages here, they both stayed here for extended periods of time. But the tribes on the eastern side of the Mississippi were not nomadic tribes like the tribes to the west. All the nations to the east, those people lived in cities and towns, and they had big log houses, and they didn't stay in teepees and ride horses and do the things that you think of when you think of the tribes to the west of the Mississippi.
Hi, and welcome to the Pottery Cabin. And take out number 7, and in it you'll find some clay. Let's bring it out. A little packet of clay that you could use to make something yourself. Now we're going to listen to someone tell us about the Pottery Barn.
Good morning, students. I'm Charles. I'm the potter here at Fort Boonesborough, and also in the process of learning how to make some soap. What I'll do in this cabin here is I take the clay that had been dug from a local creek, and it's dried out. Then I hammer it down to a smaller size, and then I grind it using this wooden hammer also down to a powder. What I do is I look for sticks and rocks to pick out the clay, pick those out, and then after I grind it down small enough, I'll take it, drop it onto a screen, down into a bucket here, and the small stuff falls through. The rough stuff that I catch, can't use that. The small stuff, powder, what I do is I'll take this, and I'll mix it with water and make mud out of it. And on this board here, I've kind of had this sampled out here for people to experience up close. I just take the lumps of clay, and then I hammer it down, like I said, to smaller size. And I pick out the sticks and rocks. And if there's any metal or plastic or glass in there, I take that out also. And then I grind it down to a smaller size. And then take the powder, drop it onto a screen, and it falls through. And that's what I mix with water to make the mud.
Could we see a close-up of the screen?
Sure.
And the mallet?
And the clay is left, I call that cat litter. It's basically if you got a cat at home, that's what they use in the bathroom. Yeah. A round screen basket here, pretty coarse. That's a larger objects fall through it. And if I want a cleaner, finer clay, then I'll use this flat one here that's a much smaller openings in the hose. A half a pound of clay,
is the ball that he took back to the table and kneaded.
Yeah. Here. Usually do it on a piece of cloth because I can pull on the cloth better. But kneading, what I do is just take the clay, kind of push it down and then raise it up and give a little bit of a twist and push down. This is removing air pockets out of the clay. Because the air pockets, if they get hot in the clay piece, when I put it in the oven, the kiln, then it'll blow the piece apart. This is the potter's wheel, and this spins around when the ball of clay is on the wheel. I throw it on there, make sure it's snug on there good. Kind of press it down. Kind of pat it down, then press it. Then I'll check and see if it's centered. I'll just move the wheel around a little bit. Use my foot.
Moving
Push back and
the
forth.
metal bar to actually move the potter's wheel in a circular motion.
Okay, scoot over a little bit. Right now I'm checking to see if the clay is pretty well centered on the wheel. The more centered on the wheel the clay is, then the easier it is to shape the round pot or bowl or cup that comes off the wheel. Well, that'll be good enough. Then what I would do is I'd take water, squeeze onto the ball of clay, and then crank the wheel. Of course, I gotta get my hands wet, muddy. That's the fun part of this. And then press down on the clay with one hand and kind of hold the edge of the clay with the other hand here. And what I'm trying to do is trying to smooth it down, but also center the clay on the wheel. Right now it's a little bit wobbly. You see it kind of moving back and forth a little bit. I can press that out pretty much. It's a little bit smoother. Always got to keep some water on there to keep it slippery. Makes it easier to use. Remember, this wheel is operated by a foot power. This is called a treadle wheel. And back in the Daniel Boone days, in 1775, you would not find a potter's wheel like this on the frontier. It'd be in the big cities back east, like Boston and Philadelphia. Here on the frontier, you would have a kick wheel, which I have a couple in the cabin. It's smoothed down. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up. Make sure I got plenty of water on there and some mud on my hand. And what I usually do is I take my finger, my index finger, push down the center and just press down to make the hole, the opening. Got to make sure I don't go down too far, or I'll go down all the way down to the wooden board, and that's too deep. Got more water. Now what I do is I'm going to open this hole up by pulling my finger out toward me. Pull that so far. Kind of pinch the outside too. My thumb and finger, and then raise my hands up. And what happened is the hole will get bigger, and the walls of the clay will start to form and get thinner and smaller. And it'll start rising up until some height. Gotta make sure I mix that mud up on fingers there. This would probably end up being a cup or a bowl. If I make a bowl out of it, then what I would do is I'd just flare it out at the top and make it larger. I'll do that right now. When I squeeze the clay out more than I push in, it'll actually it'll develop a bowl. I've got a big lump right there.
Okay, now we are at the forge. where the blacksmith is going to tell us about what they do, what they made in a forge. And you have to take out baggie number 8, which has a nail.
And this is a very large nail, to give you an idea of what a nail might have needed to look like in that time period. It's probably 10 inches longer than what we would use as a normal household nail.
Maybe something like this. Blacksmith could basically use their forge to heat up metal where it becomes hot and soft enough to shape. It becomes very much like a tough clay whenever you soak enough heat into it. And so a blacksmith uses their tools to then, much like the potter, shape their iron and their steel into useful items. They might be making items to help people cook, kind of like what I'm working on right now in this pot hook. I'm going to be adjusting the geometry and making it a little longer, and then making everything from tools for the carpenters and the woodworkers to also like Squire Boone, who ran the first forge at Boonesborough. He would have also been making sure that people could hunt animals and defend themselves by working on their flintlocks. He was a professional gunsmith, and even out here on the frontier, farther away from out east where industry was, he was still capable of doing some high-end craftsmanship, even out here on the frontier. This is a bellows, which is how I'm able to heat up my coal, my charcoal, to the temperatures that I need to get the metal hot. And then I team that up with either coal or charcoal, like what I'm adding right here. You can hear that. You can hear the thermodynamic reaction in there, where that fuel is starting to ignite. So basically, I can get temperatures up to 3,000 degrees with the help of this special fireplace called a forge. It's just a small contained space that I can build this fire and work from it. And as you can see, when the metal becomes hot, it starts glowing like a light bulb. And as it gets closer to its melting point, it changes. It goes from being red to orange and then to yellow. We're going to soak some more heat into this, because you saw how it was actually going the other direction, from a brighter red and then dropping to duller. That's what a blacksmith is looking out for. That's why they usually work in a dark area, either indoors or outdoor, but at least have enough shade that they can see those color ranges. And then you'll see how soft this is. I'll be able to adjust this hook really easy. I'm going to work on making this longer. So we'll tap on this and straighten this out. And it went from being very strong to almost like loose, like a wire. And now I'm going to put it back to a hook shape, but this time the geometry of that hook is going to be tighter. And that's why I'm using the horn of this anvil to borrow the geometry that's in the horn, and that's how I'm able to get that really nice hook there. Now,
Okay, we are now at the lighting cabin, and you can take out bag number 9, and in it you will find a tea candle. And you're going to go inside, and we're going to listen to someone tell us about how they made candles here at the fort.
Hello. We're here to make some candles. It takes 50 dips to make a large candle. It also takes 40 dips to make a smaller candle. They would use pig fat, bear fat, cow fat, any kind of fat from the animals they would use. They would call it tallow. The beef fat would harden better than any of the other fats and burn longer. They would use rush lights. They would dip them in the fat and then light them. They also have Betty lamps that they would use, which is like a little oil lamp. They put different kinds of fat inside it with a wicking. Light it and it produce a little bit of light.
So in the front of the cabin is a barrel, and inside is a very large pot that gets hot, very hot to the touch, and then you can make your shape your candles out of that wax or melted fat. And then above that
this is our candle rack.
Yes, a large candle rack hanging from the ceiling, and they use the candle rack to hang on each of the spindles, like, so that the candles would dry.
That's true. The wax is also heated between 160 and 180, depending on the weather. If it's real humid, you have to turn it down a little bit. If it gets too hot in here, the candles will slide off the wicks. So you have to be precise on when you make your candles. This is the candle rack that they would use. You would hang string on the bottom. You would soak the string in the wax for a minute so that the wax will start sticking. Then you would dip it down inside each one of the spindles inside the barrel of wax or the fat that they would use. And it takes approximately 2 hours from start to finish.
Okay, we are at the hunter's cabin, and I need you to take out bag number 10, where you will find a pelt, or you may want to call it a fur, from an animal, from a real animal. It could be a bear, a rabbit, an elk, a deer. We don't know exactly, so you may feel of it and decide for yourself which one you have.
Welcome. Come in. This is where we do gunsmithing, leather crafts. We make powder horns here. Also, the long hunters would have brought their furs here to trade for repairs on their guns and the items they would have needed. Typical animals that would have been around the fort at the time. We have the hides here hanging on the wall. You have your elk, your buffalo, your black bear. In the hoop is a beaver skin. You see many bags and knives and a rifling machine. Typical pouch that would have been used to carry their shooting supplies in. They would carry their bullets and their tools to repair the guns. Right now I'm in the process of making a birdhouse. That is a flintlock pistol that you looked at there, 70 caliber. I'm doing a powder horn here to carry the gunpowder. A typical saying during the Revolutionary War, we have no king but Jesus.
We have one more surprise for you.
So, after loading the gun by putting powder down the front, what would be a patch and a bullet, after that, we load gunpowder into this little spot right here that's called a frizzen and a pan. And once we've brought the gun to full cock, we can fire in the hole!
Thank you for coming with us to Fort Boonesborough in Kentucky.